So you may have heard during the course of the past couple of days, and I guess this came up again at the CAC convention over the weekend. Number one item, pride. That's what Francois Legault was pushing to the membership there. But then the other issue that came up, and the one he called a matter of survival for the future of Quebec, had to do with immigration and his appeal to us, to all Quebecers, to give him a big mandate, a bigger one than he has now, so he could go to the federal government and basically get all immigration powers provincially. In other words, have the feds butt out and let Quebec decide who and when and how it would handle its own immigration. Now, that was a couple of days ago. Now there's a report out from the Institut Québec suggesting that, you know what, maybe to some degree, that's actually what does need to be done. Mia HOMSY is President and Director General of the Institut Québec. She's on the line right now. Ms. HOMSY, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you, I don't want to necessarily frame this the wrong way, but I will say from what I've read that you think the idea of Quebec getting more control of its immigration powers is a good idea. Why?
Well, what we say in the report is that it's a good idea if it's focused especially for the immigration, the economic immigration, not for the selection part, because Quebec already has the powers to decide to select immigrants according to different criteria decided by Quebec. So where it's more complicated and problematic, it's for all the administration part, because it takes, in average, 31 months for the files to be treated in Ottawa. So once Quebec did the selection, which is also a long process, the average period, temporary foreign worker, for example, or temporary immigrant has to wait is around 6 months. Then the other part is 31 months. So the total is 37 months. So somebody that's here waiting for the approval to know if they're going to be accepted as permanent immigrant has to wait in average 37 months. So what we say, and since we don't have information about why it's so long, how do you justify the 31 months, which is longer than the rest of Canada? It's long. It's getting longer everywhere because the effects of the pandemic, but it's longer than Quebec, and the federal government doesn't have any clear answer to this. So if Quebec can also contribute to that part of the treatment of the files, well, we would know what's the reason. Is it because Quebec has caps lower than in the rest of Canada, so we can accept less immigrants every year? Or is it just because it's too long, the administrative inefficiencies of the federal government?
See, that's where I get not confused, but I don't understand how it would be better if Quebec had more control, because wouldn't more control ostensibly with the CAQ government equal fewer immigrants?
Well, that's already being decided by Quebec. So what we say is Quebec wants more power for three categories of immigrants. So economic immigrants, but also refugees and what's called regroupement familial. So if someone's here and the rest of the family wants to come, the two latter categories, so the refugees and the regroupement familial, are controlled by Ottawa for the selection part. François Legault wants more control over these two parts. What we say is we don't get into the decision, what he asked about these two categories. We really focus on the immigration, the economic immigration. So Quebec already has the power to select these immigrants, and Quebec already has the power to decide the number of immigrants that they want to accept every year. So it wouldn't change anything. What we say is that the part that is long and complicated regarding the delays for the treatment of the file, the analysis, like all regarding the security control of the security, the health conditions of the immigrants, and these things could be done also in Quebec. So it won't change anything except for maybe being more efficient in the process and reduce the delays.
Okay, I want to understand something here. Two things, actually. So you mentioned the typical waiting time for someone coming here by the time it's all done is 37 months, but it's only in the 20s, the rest of Canada, an average 6 to 28 months. Why is there a discrepancy between Canada handling immigration for every other province and the length with what has to happen when it's someone immigrating to Quebec? Do we know why?
We know for a few elements. So the selection in Quebec takes on average 6 months. So if you focus on the Quebec part, we have an explanation there. But once we know that, once we say that, well, there's still it's still 31 months compared to 6 to 27, 28 months. We don't know, and that's why we say, well, if Quebec could contribute to the analysis of the files for the administration part, well, we would know why it's so much longer, because there's no transparency, there's no clarity, no one knows. We've seen a few explanations recently, and it says that Quebec sends more files that are not e-files, so it's more paper versions. That's the only thing we know, and there's another element that is not being discussed much, but maybe because the caps in Quebec are lower than in the rest of Canada. Mm-hmm. So every year we do not accept as many immigrants as else in the rest of Canada. So it's normal that if we have a lot of demand and many temporary or permanent workers temporary workers or international students and immigrants abroad want to come here, well, it takes more time before we get to their files, because we accept less every year.
So we're taking fewer. It takes longer. Does this just mean that, the immigrants give up and end up going elsewhere?
Well, that's what we say. It's something we fear, because what we've seen is that instead of having more permanent immigrants, what we see in Quebec, it started around 2016, is that we have more and more temporary immigrants, so either foreign students or temporary workers. So in total, in 2019, just before the pandemic, before the borders were closed, we had like 94,000 immigrants. So it's way more than the 40 or the 45 or 50 that we talk in the public debate. So there's much more to what we see, meaning that the labor market needs more persons, more workers. Our universities also need more foreign students. They pay important fees to study here. They bring new ideas. They bring innovation. So I think this is a proof that we need them in Quebec. It makes the society more dynamic, the labor market more dynamic. We have an aging population. It's obvious. We see the data. They can see the labor market is extremely tight. The unemployment rate is 3.9% right now in Quebec, the lowest in Canada. So I think the data is very clear.
I have a question about language. Do we know what kind of role language plays in this, in so much that those temporary immigrants may feel like they can't choose what language to educate their children in, or educate themselves in, and maybe, in terms of work opportunity, that they don't feel that they have a future here? Do we know what kind of role the language laws here may play in all this?
Well, we didn't look at the language in the report. We always really decided to focus on the economic data and focus on the labor market integration. But I think that the recent numbers, when we look at the unemployment rate of immigrants, it was around 13% 10 years ago. Now it's 5.3%. When we look at the employment rate, which has now surpassed the employment rate of immigrants in Ontario, and it's close to BC's immigrants. So I think what we see is that the needs are so important that we actually find ways to integrate them. And instead of, we adapted our policies, our immigration policies, and now we have fast tracks for immigrants that come with temporary status to become permanent immigrants. And that really helps, because we know they studied here, so they understand French, they can speak French, they work here for a few years before they become permanent residents. So I think we have the capacity to integrate them, and they have the capacity to adapt.
So as it stands right now, they need to be here, for 2 years? They need 2 years of work experience before they can apply for permanent residency. You want that shortened?
Of course. It was before, you didn't have that constraint. So that's new. And I think it's probably a way the CAC found to try to reduce the delays. So because if you wait 12 to 18 months if you're a student, or 24 months if you're a foreign worker, before you can ask to have the permanent residency. Well, I think the strategy was maybe to lower the pressure on Ottawa for the delays, but actually it just make it too long because you have to add this period of 12 to 24 months, let's say, to the 37 months after once you're selected. Right. So it becomes like ridiculous.
Okay. Mia HOMSY from the Institut Québec, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
It's going to be interesting to see how the government reacts to this because, they're going to point to the fact that she thinks, or that the Institut thinks, right, that, yes, they should have more control, which is exactly what they're pushing for. But yesterday, Justin
the Prime
Trudeau,
Minister
right?
said, no, merci, we're good.
We're good. Don't need to change it. We got to keep ourselves involved in this. So it's going to be interesting, a little tug of war going on here.
I'm not for Quebec having more autonomy on this, personally.